So it was about 10 days ago that we heard about Uber being hacked into, and late last week we found out about Optus also being hacked into, and huge amounts of their customer data has been leaked. And so I thought I would spend today sort of talking a little bit about what was the differences between the two different types of hacks that have actually occurred, and based on the information that we've seen sort of publicly available, and I guess how companies can make sure and protect themselves from also being hacked into. And besides Uber, we obviously had Optus, but then we've also had Twilio, which was before Uber. And two of these attacks, both in Uber's instance and Twilio's instance, were very similar. And what appears to have happened inside of Optus is quite different to what's happened in both Uber and Twilio. So in Uber's instance and Twilio's instance, what's happened is a user inside of their organization has accidentally leaked their password information or their two-factor authentication login details to the hacker. And they've done this through some sort of, the hacker's done this through like a phishing email or a phishing event that's occurred. So where they've tried to send a notification, could have been via SMS or email to the user, and the user think this is a legitimate way of authenticating, and they've entered in their login details into this link. The login details haven't actually been sent to their normal secure environment, it's actually been sent to the hacker. The hacker's been able to use that information and actually log into their internal infrastructure. And what then happened in, say, Uber's instance is the hacker got inside of their internal network, happened to actually be able to find authentication keys that related to them, user being able to log into their cloud infrastructure, and then was able to then get access to their full cloud infrastructure and huge amounts of data, and supposedly being able to download that data. But there's a number of ways that these multi-factor authentication security breaches could have been actually stopped. And the main way of being able to do this is, instead of using SMS or using email as a authentication method, is actually using a physical USB device. The USB device gets plugged into the person's computer. That device, you can only log into that infrastructure if you've actually got that physical device actually attached to that particular computer. And that's the best way of doing it. And so companies should be looking at being able to roll out these physical USB devices to all of their users that are needing to authenticate to their network. It's a lot more painful, it's more expensive, there's a lot more management required in actually being able to do this. But ultimately, if you're wanting to protect your data and your customers' data, this is the best way to actually look after your data. In Optus's instance, there's been a leak of the 9 million customers that have ever been a customer of Optus. And what's been leaked is, person's name, their address, their date of birth, but also details like their passport and license numbers. Now, why this is a concern to every customer who is an Optus customer is that this data can then be used to then recreate accounts for other services or apply for credit cards and those types of things. And so we're going to see, the results of what's happened with Optus to then result in further sort of hacks that are going to occur for individuals and individual theft that's going to occur. And so this is going to be, an interesting time for the individual consumer to be really aware of requests that are being sent via SMS or email, to make sure they're not clicking on any type of phishing type emails or SMSs. But I guess the disappointing thing that's happened with Optus is what appears to have occurred is that they've had an API that's been available, and the API has been able for anyone to actually access without any authentication. And so this, in my mind, isn't a hack. This is just really poor practice. Someone's created an API, they've had the ability where anyone can actually talk to this API and pull out customer data simply by writing a quick query, and any developer could have been able to do this. The problem with this is that we now know about it because a hacker has actually gone out and publicly said that they've actually done this and provided sample data of what's actually been pulled from their server. But how long has this actually been occurring? And has other hackers or other developers actually been able to do this, and maybe not have pulled the full 9 million records, but they've pulled a smaller subset of these records? And have they been doing this over a longer period of time, and Optus had no idea that this has actually had occurred? So there's huge questions, and there's a lot of more information that I think Optus needs to release to the public around sort of what's actually occurred here. And is this actually true? And what we're reading in Twitter, is it true? Maybe it's not. But ultimately, this comes down to having really good security practices in place, or just simple security practices in place, but also using third-party companies to do security testing on your infrastructure. And doing penetration testing on any server infrastructure could have easily picked up this type of vulnerability, and that's something that Optus surely should have been doing. And if they haven't, then why? And if they were doing this, then how did this ever not get picked up in the first place? So I think for companies, security needs to be the first thing you think about when you're developing any product. And this is something I think, we're going to see lots of big changes that are going to occur over the months ahead of companies really taking security seriously. And I think at the CEO level of these companies, particularly these big organizations, I think they've got the biggest risk, and I think the biggest challenge is that the CEOs don't have the technical understanding to actually understand what are the risks and how these risks can actually be prevented, and how they can ask the right questions to their CTOs inside of their business to make sure these risks are being mitigated. So it's going to be an interesting few months ahead, and it'll be interesting to see how many more companies get hacked into in the months and weeks ahead.